How's everybody doing tonight? Shout out to my number one network guy. Glad to see him in the house. I feel you, man. It's a lot, man. It's a lot, man. You young, I'm old, man. It's just me. So I feel you, man. Doing YouTube is not for the weak. Shout out to my man Network Bro. Glad he can join me. I will go tell you to subscribe to his channel, but I don't know if he's still doing videos. Definitely one of the top networking guys out there. When he comes on, I definitely popped up. I used to go do the stig of the day for him. Shout out to who he's doing networking. So I would, whatever topic we was talking about, BGP or one of the network protocols, I would jump in with the stig of the day. So definitely glad he could join me. Hopefully he gets back up, or just hopefully he's doing well in his endeavors. Man. YouTube is not for the weak. But he went Strive there for a year. He was there about a year and a half going Strive. So, but shout out to him. Shout out to the number one privacy guy on the YouTube, up and coming. My man, Mr. Turner in the house. You see it. We're going to talk about planning. One of the security families. You see it right there. NIST 800-53R5. And my favorite implementation of that is what my man Network Bruh said. There's the STIG of the day. Security Technical Implementation Guidelines. So we talk about the policies and procedure, the management parts. We talk about SOP, guidelines, procedures, all that cool paperwork. But when the rubber meets the road, I'm going STIGs every day. A lot of people hate STIGs, though. But when you talk about hardening the systems, shout out to my man Chris Whitlock. Go check him out on Study GRC. I'm over there usually in the chat doing some things. It's our standard 3-tier architecture. We probably switch it up and start showing some serverless architecture, aka Lambda with AWS. So doing some things. Our standard documentation there, NIST 800-53 for security and privacy controls for all United States federal information systems, except those for national security. It's published by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, aka NIST, which is a non-regulatory agency of the United States Department of Commerce. NIST develops and issues standard guidelines and other publications to assist federal agencies in implementing the Federal Information Security Modernization Act of 2014, aka FISMA, to help manage the cost-effective programs to protect their information and information systems. So this is what I usually talk about every Tuesday at 9. Chris tells me I need to start earlier. Shout out to him. But getting at this 853 controls, here's are the 20 families. We rapidly closing them up. We on PL this weekend, which is planning. So ours are the 20. So this covers 99% of what you need in a security program. I mean security and privacy controls. Once again, we're doing PL for planning. Those are the planning and the sub security families. Policies and procedures. That's always the -1 for any security family we just saw. Security, system security and privacy plans, rules of behavior, concepts of operation, security, privacy, and architecture, central management, baseline selection, and the favorite one, baseline tailoring. Once you select it, you got to tailor it for your organization and your domain. NIST 800-53 is a reference implementation, meaning it gives you basic controls. Then agencies like IRS, HIPAA, CGIS, which is FBI, they come in and give you detailed security requirements for those particular agencies. So Let's see what's going. Shout out to Dr. Finesse. Thanks for joining. TMPBO, I appreciate that. I like this time. Let the other folks get a nap in before we jump on here. Facts. I'll be getting my nap in. Shout out to my man Farron Perry for joining us. I probably need to go check on my LinkedIn. I got to get better on the LinkedIn side. So those are what we're going to touch on. I usually touch on 3 or 4 of those. I usually don't go on. Just getting started, Perry. You didn't miss anything. Just getting started. Shout out to Restream. They got a lot of nice beats in their tunes. So shout out to them. You see it once again: policies and procedures, system security and privacy plans, rules of behavior, concepts of operations, security and privacy architecture, central management, baseline selection, and baseline tailoring. Once again, that tailoring is specifically for your company, agency, or org. You're going to do different IAM. You might be running Active Directory. You could be running Unix. You could be in the cloud. You could be running AFDS, from an IAM and security standpoint. So that's where that tailoring comes in. So let's keep rolling. Once again, the -1, develop and document and disseminate plan policies that address purpose, scope, roles, and responsibility, management commitment, coordination among organizational entities, compliance, and is consistent with applicable laws, executive orders, directive, regulation, policies, standards, guidelines, and procedures. Right? Sometimes you might get something that's a government regulation that's counterintuitive to your NIST publication, or it could add on to it. Each state now has their own breach notification, 50 users before you get hacked, or 100 users, or 1,000, right? So that applicable law. So you have breach notification, but what actually initiates it or makes it come into effect is the state will tell you you only have to report if you lose 100, 500, or 1,000, right? Then the other part of that is the timing of it. Is it 24 hours, 48 hours? I think the new breach notification, which I don't like, is 72 hours. I really like 24 hours. But, you as a company still can, when you do your third-party risk assessment, which we probably talk about Friday again at lunchtime, what that looks like. Shout out to Todd. Thanks for joining me. Greetings to Big Brother PBO. Appreciate that. So let's keep going. You know how we do it. Drop any questions in there. I think it's going to be short today with the planning. Drop any tech or cybersecurity questions in the chat. Security and privacy plans. Develop security and privacy plans for the systems are consistent with your organization enterprise architecture. Explicitly define the constitute system components. Describe the operational context of the systems in terms of mission and business processes. Identify individuals that fulfill system roles, responsibility. Identify information types processed, stored, and transmitted. Most people know I do IRS work, so we would show this as maybe a part of our security architecture. Right, we have standard 3-tier architecture. We got our web tier, app tier, and database tier. You see these lines? They show you the direction that your data flow. So your web tier EC2 with the load balancer, once again, goes to the application balancer, which goes to your app tier, which goes to your database tier. So theoretically, in this design, which is a good design, if somebody from the internet hacked one of your EC2 boxes, you couldn't directly jump to your database and try to query it. Why is that? Your SSNs, FTI, federal tax information, HIPAA and high trust information, 9 times out of 10 is going to be stored in a database. So theoretically, you have to hack the web tier, hack the app tier, then get to the database tier, right? So that's the 3 tier. So the public subnet is where the internet could get to, but the internet could not get directly to your database because see it's on a private subnet. So that would show kind of our web architecture, kind of will show what our data flow is. Then the part that's missing is how are you authenticating from your internet to your web tier, right? Is that username, password? It's just a web tier, so you let anybody from the web tier hitting your web server can get in. 443, all that's encrypted, right? So all of that will show up here in our architectural diagram. Data flow, IM, how are we authenticating, AFDS, Active Directory. So how are we doing it, right? And that will be part of our documentation there. Let's look at the supplemental guidelines. System security plan and privacy plans are scoped to the systems and system components, which is defined in an authorization boundary and contains an overview of the security and privacy requirements for the systems and controls selected to satisfy those requirements. And we'll look at the controls coming up that would fit this type of architecture here, our standard 3-tier. So we got any questions? Good evening. NC workers. See what my man Dwight's got going on here. I'm gonna have to get my life together so I can really jump on stage for the PT family. You can always come up. You probably better at the PT family than me, so we can talk about it. Let's see. Is that 3-tier standard for AWS? 3-tier standards for actually was really standard for on-prem data centers. That technology is really from the 80s, right? Everybody's going serverless now. Serverless and containers. Containerization is real big with Kubernetes leading the pack in Docker. So I think more for a modernization system, you probably get more towards containers. Containers are just so complex. I think the 3-tier actually is easy to set up. Even if you look at the STIGs, they're still talking about 3-tier, but more mature companies, and I would say technical sound, everybody's going to Kubernetes and Docker containers. So now actually the 3-tier is more for on-prem and really early before the cloud. So when I was at DoD, right before when the cloud was starting, we were in standard 3-tier. Let's keep rolling. Let's see, rules of behavior. I always put that as part of the AUP, to be honest. Establishment for an individual requiring access to the system. We were talking about that in the Discord, right? What is the standard AUP? The rules describe responsibilities, inspect behavior, information system usage, security and privacy. Receive a documented acknowledgement for such individuals, indicating that they have read, understand, and so really that's standard AUP, which is part of that. Which it says right there, actually acceptable use and agreement after acceptable use policy or procedure. Rules of behavior, type of agreement for organization. Other types includes non-disclosure agreements, conflict of interest agreement, acceptable use agreement. Organization consider rules of behavior based on individual user roles and responsibilities and differentiate between rules and the ability of privileged users and the rules that apply to a general user. That's really a good statement because what my DBAs can do, what my sysadmins can do, is going to be different than the general user. Right. And I think we were talking about that in the Discord. So somebody asked me, is there a developer AUP? And I said yes. So my developers would have a standard rules of behavior or acceptable use agreement. But on top of that is what software can you download on your machine? A lot of times we let developers download on your machines because they're testing stuff, they're doing proof of concepts. Originally, we used to make them get security approval, but they was testing so much stuff, it was crazy. So we just kind of gave them training of what software we most likely to approve, and we let you download that to your laptop, right? Of course, you would scan it before you download it. A lot of times they had hash numbers on the download, so you can make sure the hash numbers match what you download to make sure nobody actually hacked it. So those are just once again some training you would give the developers and what that would look like. Oh, shout out to that. I'm studying for the I'm studying for my AWS stats. To have questions, just ask them at the end, or you can put them in the chat if you want. Those are those are tech questions. Yeah, you can drop them in the chat if you want to, or you can come up, or we can talk later tomorrow or some, however you want to do it, Ty. Uh, Hopefully, I can answer them, but I'll check them. But yeah, so that's it. Once again, the acceptable use is usually what you see because that's ordinary user. Then once again, each role, especially privileged roles, what's my developers going to have? What's my DevOps guy? What security is going to have? Right, they're going to have different users, and really my system admins and my DBAs, how that's going to work. So let's keep going. Like I said, I think this is going to be short because planning doesn't have a lot to it. Concept of operations. Develop a concept of operation for systems. Describe how the organization intends to operate the systems. Perspective for information security. Review and update the ConOps. I think that's usually every year if you have a large system change. May include, that's really what I include in there, right? The system and privacy plans for the system, other system development lifecycle. That's what I had in the AUP for the developers. How do you check code in? How you do peer review? How does it go through the pipeline? How do you get code into production? Right. It's a living document that requires updating throughout the system development lifecycle. For example, during system design review, con operation is checked to ensure that it remains consistent with the design controls and system architecture. Um, I don't really see a lot of con ops unless you working for a large organization, aka DoD is the only one I thought I've actually seen that. Usually, you have standard operating procedures you're going to put in, which is much smaller than the con ops, right? And in that standard operating procedures is how do you do something. Once again, in there, I gave the developer 6 things, and one of them was uh, DevOps. How do you do that? Version control. What's our procedure? What are we using for version control? Right. ConOps I've seen have 400 or 500 pages. So usually, and smaller companies, that's just too heavy for that. So usually, in the ConOps, I would just take all our procedures for our functions, slap them together, make an index, and that will be our ConOps. Right. In a big organization, you have ConOps plus all that other stuff. Right. So once again, I don't see those a lot. And I think that's really more of a kind of waterfall type thing, too. Security and privacy architecture. Develop security and private architecture for the system that describes requirements and approach to be taken for protecting the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your organizational information. Describe requirements, approach to be taken for processing PII to minimize privacy risk to individuals. I'm gonna have to get my man up in here, Dwight, to talk about um, privacy architecture. I've never done a privacy architecture. Now I've done security architectures every day. I just never thought about privacy added on there. Usually in my security architecture, in the procedures, I'll talk about privacy. A lot of things pulling from CCPA and GDPR. What are we going to do with cookies? If somebody actually want to delete to forget yourself, we're not marking it to delete. We're actually going to delete it, right? So some of the probably top 10 of things you would see in CCPA or GDPR, but I don't think I've ever really talked about it as a privacy architecture, right? So I might have to get my man Dwight up in here and we talk about what that would look like from a privacy architecture. I've never, once again, talked about that. And you know, we're gonna look at that diagram. Like I do that diagram once again. I talk about uh, data flow control, where we saving the PII, federal tax information, HIPAA and high trust. What tables that in? We marking it, data tagging. I just never really thought about that from a privacy perspective. And shout out to my man doing their Tuesday privacy take. So what would that look like from a privacy architecture? Once again, I just never thought about it at that level. But I think privacy is like it, PBS. No, it wasn't a requirement for the business, but that's correct. I just never thought about that. Like I said, I've been kind of adding it to a little bit. Like I said, talking about cookies, talking about deleting information, making sure I'm tagging it correctly. Um, Making sure you have right to forget, letting people update certain part of their information, right? Privacy to correct their information if it's wrong. But once again, I never thought about that from a privacy architecture standpoint. PBL might have to get with Dwight and we do, and Chris, we might have to do a privacy architecture stream. I need to break that down. Central management. Central management refers to organizational-wide management and implementation of selected controls and policies. This includes planning, implementing, and accessing, authorizing, and monitoring organizationally defined, centrally managed controls and process. As the centrally management of the controls is generally associated with the concept of common inherent controls, such as management promotes facilities standardization control. We talked about that. When you do your stuff up in the cloud, Amazon's going to take care of a lot of that infrastructure. They got the data center. They got the webcams looking at the data center. They got where you got to badge into their data center to do work, right? They got the roles and responsibilities of the DBAs and SAs, right? Amazon's taking care of that. So when we do our SSP, we're going to inherit Amazon's, or shout out to Azure or Google or Oracle Cloud. We're going to inherit those controls because that's under their purview, right? It's a shared responsibility. So their shared responsibility is the data center and the physical controls of the data center, right? From a central management piece of that. Let's see if there's any questions. Let's see. Makes sense to government's more security grade. Yeah, 100%. I don't know if it's greater. I just don't think they really thought about privacy like that. I think that really got big the last 5 years, really, especially when GDPR came and Europe started really hitting on that. I think people, and I thought that before, if my security's tight, my privacy's tight. Which security helps with privacy, but you can have tight security and still have lax privacy. So I think once again, those are two separate things, and I'm really finally getting wrapped around. I thought the government was more lollygagging and getting things done. There are, and I think too is I think it's usually the industry. I think the industry is usually ahead of the government than the government um, catches up with industry. But one thing I do like about it is they don't jump on every hot fad or a thing that's hot, right? So which is good and bad. By the time the DOD get it and still get it, it's 5 years old. So they didn't really vet it. They really got procedures around it. They really got roles around it. They really got scanners around it, right? So they really drill down into it. But sometimes they're a little late to the party. But once they do it, it's something that's been truly vetted. I sound like an old guy for the old tech, truly vetted. So the baseline selection, you see it right there, the 853B. We did a video on that if you want to check it out. Select the control baseline for the system. Control baselines are predefined set of controls specifically assembled to address the protection needs of a group, organization, or community of interest. Controls are chosen for baselines to either satisfy a mandate imposed by law, executive orders, directives, regulations. We just saw that at the beginning, right? 800-53 came out a directive from FISMA which was the Modernization Act of 2014. Right. So a lot of time, what it says right there, for example, control baseline in SP 800-53 is based on requirements for FISMA and the Private Act. Right. So that's how I got a DOD. DOD got that FISMA requirement. They was doing a modernization. That's when we started doing STIGs for implementation. Shout out to my man Network Bryce to give me the STIG of the day. I should just pop in with a STIG on. So shout out to him. But once again, we'll talk about baselines and what that looks like. Baseline tailoring. Tailoring selects control baselines by applying specific tailoring action. The concept of tailoring allows organizations to specialize or customize a set of baseline controls by applying a defined set of tailoring action. Tailoring actions facilitate such a specialization and customization by allowing organizations to develop security and privacy plans that reflect the specific mission and business function and environment where the system operates. The threat and vulnerabilities that can affect their systems and other conditions or situations that can impact their mission or business success. Right. So once again, when you're tailoring, 853, you saw that they had a ton of controls, but what specific technology stack is your organization running? What specific data classification is your organization running? IRS has specific tailoring, hardening, than DOD. The IRS uses schisms hardening. The IRS, did I say that right? Yeah, IRS uses schisms. DOD uses STIGs, right? A lot of other agencies, I think CJIS uses the CIS benchmarks, right? So each one of those are different hardenings compared to the agency's requirement, all right? So what I do sometimes when I go on private industry, depending on what they're using their data from, I'll use government hardening because it's just proved. So I might pull some hardening from DOD STIGs. I might pull out some IRS publications because they talk a little bit more about shredding, physical controls. If you got special SSN and credit cards and IRS, they want you to put it in double envelopes so nobody can hold it up to the light. Right. So that's how deep the IRS gets. So depending on your organization and what you're trying to do, I'll pick and choose different controls and try to tailor it specifically for your business. Right. So take it to hopefully the next level of security. Let's see what my man Dwight said there. Bigger on confidential. Yeah, everyone's still getting up. Yep. I think privacy is the hidden gem. Like you said, everybody's finally getting ramped up to it. Shout out to Space Taco. Waving to my man Ty. So let's keep going. So AWS config are actually conformance packs or hardening things you can put in to your security, right? To help you come up with your security architecture. Right. So here's some of the security architecture you can scan depending on how you set up your organization to figure out what kind of compliance you will. Amazon is say AWS has a well architected framework for security that they use from your organization, mostly used for private organization. CMC is the new DoD standard. PBO is not super happy with CMC, but it is coming out. They got level 3, 4, and 5. FedRAMP, one of my favorite ones, which is really NIST 800-53 in the cloud. You got low and moderate. I usually do a lot of IRS work, so we usually want you to be at a FedRAMP moderate. Then the other part of that is this 800-53 revision 4 or revision 5. I think currently everybody's supposed to be up to revision 5. I think it's been out for 2 or 3 years. I think it was 2021. So it's been out for 3 years. So I think it's mandated that if you're doing this, you need to be on that R5 type one. So on that R5, these are some of the checks when you scan that it will look for. The management of a system account, automated mechanism. The credentials are audited for authorized device, user, processed by ensuring AMI access keys are rotated per organizational policy. You see down there, you get the rules require access key rotation every 90 days. The actual value should reflect your organizational policies. So it's telling you R53R5 wants you to rotate your access keys every 90 days, which can be kind of tough, right? If you're sharing keys outside your organization with some people, you rotated 90 days, you got to give them the new keys to rotate. But a lot of times, these are keys inside that you use to access stuff. So it's really like changing your password every 90 days. So you rotate your keys. And so if somebody actually get one of your keys in 90 days, once again, that key wouldn't be valid. So how will people put your keys in there or your secret tokens? Developers were accidentally uploading those to GitHub. So people would download procedures and template files and IAM files and YAML files, and they would have people's keys in them, right? So even you can look at GitHub now scans the code you check in and make sure you don't have keys in there, because there were so many keys in there. So I don't know if our developers need more training. So here's another one. AIM inline policy blocked by KMS. Basically, you should not have any inline policies. You see it right there. AWS foundational best practices values. The actual values should reflect your organization. Um, Identity access, AIM users, AIM roles, or AIM groups does not have an inline policy to allow block actions on all AMS keys. So once again, you should not allow inline policies for that. So once again, that will scan and tell you what your security architecture is, what's your security baseline is. If you pick one of those, that will be your baseline. And if anything changed in there, right, you would have to have a finding or mitigating control to figure out why you couldn't meet the NIST 800-53R5 baseline. And if you see here, these are some of the scans for the baseline. It shows you region in the left top, resource by top. So these are findings in those different type of organizations or in those buckets. See S3 bucket, EC2 subnet, API gateway. So you can scan your organization, right? And this will tell you where your baseline is at. At the bottom is resource by solution. So you got IoT, DevOps, core, machine learning. If you had a data lake, web pages, all right? So that will scan your organization and tell you what's your baseline and what's your deviation from the baseline, right? So this is actually a visualization coming from AWS config. You will use AWS Athena, and it will scan through there, and you can do pretty charts. And that's hopefully we're going to do. Shout out to Space Taco. We're going to get some GRC labs, and this will be part of your GRC labs because doing dashboards is real big in the GRC. You see compliance engineers, part of compliance engineers coming up with dashboard and what your management see, what's your management, meaning the C-suite wants to see, and what's your CIO when your CISO wants to see, right? So getting those dashboards and what people want to see. Here's another dashboard. What's non-compliant, meaning we're failing our checks, where we're compliant, and what's the total count in there. You see at the bottom, which is not unusual for a small architecture, he has 9,187 checks. I easily see 10,000, right? Like we talked about, access key rotated. Was that less than 90 days or more than 90 days? Less than 90 days is compliant. More is non-compliant, right? So AIM blacklisted checks, right? Non-compliant 138, compliance 7100. So once again, that's the dashboard. It's looking into it. Non-compliant by config rule. Once again, access key rotated. IAM users unused credential checked. IAM policy blacklisted check. MFA enabled for IAM console access. So everybody in the console should have MFA. So I guess a few people didn't have. Looked like about 30. So, but once again, this is the checks from your baseline, from your conformance, compliant, right, and what that looks like. So some things, hopefully, not hopefully, things in the future we'll do from a GRC perspective, right, and that baseline tailoring. So this is show you what you have tailored and then what's not conforming. Because really, you want to see what's in red. Because the auditors come in, they're gonna want to say what's in red. So if you if you did this ahead of time, everything in red when the auditors came, you need to have a finding or what you're gonna do for that finding. Access key rotated. Our developers didn't have the program set up to do automated key rotation. We got a poem for that. That's going to be fixed in Q4. We in Q2. That'll be fixed in Q4. Here's our agile things we're going to do to get that our backlog requirements to get all these things fixed, right? Because sometimes it's not you fixing them configuration standpoint. Your development staff got to fix it because programs are using rotating keys. Programs are using policies, right? So if you change them, you'll break the program. But the programs, they got resources, they got budgets, they got conflicting things. Once again, they already want to get those features out and not fix those security requirements they have. So, once again, AWS has a ton of federal compliance in there. CMC, FedRAMP, they got HIPAA and High Trust. They just got a ton of stuff in. I think they had 25. So a lot of times when I do IT auditing or third-party assessment, I use these configuration packs to give to the vendors of things I want them to fix. Then if they're in AWS, I tell them I need them to scan their architecture and give me the findings. All right. Most times, because when I was at the state, we spend so much money, they would do it because they want the money. So a lot of bigger companies, if you smile, they go, "We're not giving you that," right? But what they do give you at a high level, they roll them up and says, these are our findings. They won't tell you how many, but they'll tell you when they're going to fix them. Of course, you got to sign rules of behavior. You have to sign an NDA, non-disclosure agreement to get it. But we'll probably talk a little bit about that on Friday on third-party management. Let me drop the link if anybody wants to come up. A little late, dropping the link. Oh, I can't operate Restream today. We tried. So let's see the questions we got coming on in there. The emphasis be privacy, key collection. In fact, Lord help us all if the GitHub ever gets it wasn't breached. People were downloading went in there. So you didn't have to breach because all that code is downloaded. It was crazy though. Yeah, if GitHub, but yeah, people were uploading. They actually wrote a tool. Let me see if I can find that. It was crazy. I can find that article real quick. I think it was GitHub. It was crazy. Developer keys and secrets. So I would tell people they have to scan it before they get it. Let's see. Let's see. Get up. Let's see if I can find that. There was a ton of articles out there. Let me answer the questions and I'll find them. I dropped the link if anybody want to come up. Any experience with Drata? I do not. I don't. I've heard of it. I've just never used it. Let's see. Okay. Chris Shirley, bad actors ahead of the facts. Facts. I actually have to go homesick today. Need more sleep. Happy Saturday. Hope you feel better. Space tacos. Get well. Let me see if I can find, because I know that was in there. Because somebody put a tool out there I thought was cool to look at. Hmm. Talks about skin. I need to jump on Google more than Edge. I'm gonna jump on. Ooh. Let me know. Drop any more questions if you had in there. Which is see what's going on. Let's see if anybody's had any more questions on there. Are you going to go through an audit at the moment, or are there self-help groups? Are you going through an audit at the moment, or are there self-help groups? At work, yeah, I'm always doing an audit at work of some kind. I'm doing a privileged user account, auditing what the developers and the architecture doing, reviewing documentation for that. So that's kind of one of my main jobs of audit. We in the audit, going through an audit, or I'm doing an audit of some kind. So that's constantly. What's up with the AWS tiers and the services available? I'm a little confused with that question. Services, there are free services out there, free tiers available. If you get a new password, AWS free tiers out there, and usually I want to say 75-80% of those services are available at a free tier, especially the beginning ones. If you're going to do an RDS for a database, EC2, web app, DevOps, any of the GRC stuff, S3 buckets, all of that's available on the free tier. Um, uh, tis the season. So yeah, and that's one thing I'm gonna do in the course, but I'm definitely gonna kind of do it. Shout out to Chris. They were doing it, but it just that's a hard thing to stick. To do audits. They were doing projects, auditing projects. They just didn't seem to stick. I'll let Chris comment on that, but that was kind of my view of it, which is always kind of hard to do that. So that's kind of why I kind of went to Gerald's platform, and hopefully, with the number of students in there, that if you do a project like that, it'll maybe stick a little more. Maybe people pay for it. I don't know. Um, I'm just gonna run it like a class. Um, this is it. This is the project. This is when they're due, and I just got to figure out how to grade it a little better if a lot of people join. That's one thing I'm struggling with. I think we were looking at AWS config. If we do some architecture stuff, let AWS config, right? Because it's going to say it's supposed to be a 53R5. Once you scan it, what didn't meet R5, right, would be a ding or a finding that would go against, your grade. If you have multiple programs, what do you use to manage or visualize all the audit cadence, overlapping SOC 2, FedRAMP? Um, that's an excellent question. And sometimes we do get a little overlap. The cool thing for us a lot of times is depending on what they're asking for. FedRAMP from a company standpoint is this is our standard, this is our base setup, like we talked about. So you can say, here's our baseline documentation. Now, when you get to certain projects in their baseline, right, that's where their tailoring come through, right? So if they say, what is your company's baseline? We're in this 800-53 shop, we're a STIG shop, we do a CIS. This is the standard all our projects should meet from a company baseline standpoint. But when you're talking about overlay and customization, that's by a project level. Saying our password is 14 characters, blah, blah, blah. If your program you're using inside that division or that program only supports length of 12, right? They violated our company's baseline, right? But of course, they can have a mitigated control. We have 12. The reasons why is we need this crappy program for some reason, right? But our compensating control is we're only doing 12, but we have MFA and a PIV card, right? Or a CAT card, right? So those are kind of things you could do. So once again, it's the company versus the individual products. Once again, you can get a company SOC 2 or FedRAMP, but then they might ask, okay, what about this particular division or this particular program inside your company, right? And they're going to have deviations to it. Hopefully not, but a lot of them will. Once again, big external audits. We usually know that cadence, so we're ready unless they come in. Once again, when I worked for the state of Indiana Department of Revenue, Booz Allen came every 3 years, right on site with like 20 dudes. It looked like a mafia raid. So for something like that, right, we're practicing. We got all our scans. We got all our paperwork ready. Once again, we got our company baseline, but once again, our IRS system or something could have some standard deviations. What's that paperwork look like? And two is they're going to scan your stuff, so they're going to come up with findings. We done a pre-scan, so all those findings should match our findings. So we got mitigating controls, poems, right? So we got all that paperwork ready for when they have those findings. Here's our paperwork for those findings, and this is what we're going to do. This is our mitigating control. We accepted this risk, but this is why we accept it. Right? And sometimes they're going to ask you, this is our findings. Here's the big one. What's your compensating control? What's your finding? What's your risk assessment for this Cat 1, right? So they're going to pull a couple of those out, and that's really going to test your security program. Meaning, okay, that's a finding. Does management know? Do you have a write-up about it? Once again, where's your poem and your schedule? When you're going to fix it? Is it a budget issue or money issue? So you're going to fix it next year when you got a new budget. So those things are going to be big audits, and that's how they're going to test your security program. Let me know if that makes sense, Dwight. I'm rambling a little bit. I'm getting tired. I got to do a little more work, I think, too. So once again, I hang out any longer, see if anybody has any more questions. Hey, Dwight, we need to team up on that privacy architecture. I got to pull a couple of those to see what that looks like, to be honest. I appreciate everybody coming out. Shout out to Dwight. Shout out to my man Ty. Shout out to my man Study GRC. Hopefully Space Tacos is feeling better. Shout out to my man Network Bruh. He took a little hiatus off. So hopefully, he doesn't have to come back. I'm just glad to see he's doing well and progressing. Hopefully he's having a happy holidays. Let's see. Shout out to my man NC Worker. Shout out to my man Ferry Perry for joining us. Once again, I dropped the link if anybody wants to come up. Not a requirement. PBO actually tired, so it's all good. Come check me out tomorrow at 6. I'll probably set that up tonight or probably tomorrow morning. I'm so lazy. We're going to talk about incident management in AWS. When you have an incident, you can set it up manually or you can set it up to have automated response to an incident. And we walk through that, what that looks like. One of the labs we'll set up in the future, how to set up for an incident. If it's a common incident, what you should do, what you could have automated, right? It could be a DDoS attack and just taking the IP, taking it out to the NAC in your web tier and blocking that particular IP address, taking that farther to your Route 53 and block that particular IP address, add it to your blacklist. Route 53 and WAF web application firewall, they actually have a blacklisted IP address. You can add it to there and block it further out before it actually gets to your infrastructure. Sometimes that traffic could cost you money, so you want to block it before it gets in. Free WAF is free, but WAF out of basic is like $3,000 a month. That's crazy too high, right? So you got to be a big company, but they do have their DDoS for free. And I think you can add blacklisted IP. So if you got an IP that was DDoSing you, which would be more than one, you can put them in there. The cool thing is we all know, mature organizations is going to keep rotating IP address, and you're going to keep blocking them, right? So that's part of the cat and mouse game. So we'll talk about that and what that looks like. Yeah, I do too. I've just never seen it. No, I agree with you, Dwight. It's just something I've just never seen. Once again, I've seen architecture like this, what it looks like. Then two is we could talk about how our PII is moving in the system. Where's it stored at in the Amazon or Word DB? We could talk about individual tables and market these tables, or has the SSN or the nuclear codes, so we got to protect it. Who gets rights to those? That might have to have some higher level approval, right? So we can document all that and what that looks like. But from a privacy standpoint, where we can say the EC2s, we're making you pick what type of cookies you're having. Like I said, I just got to think about what that will look like. Because architecture, I always think of as a diagram, so I just don't know what that diagram will look like. I have to Google it. I'm sure there's some out there. I just haven't seen it. I just never done it, right? So, and there's very few things I ever say I haven't done or I haven't seen it. I haven't done it and I haven't seen it, which is rare for me. There's very few things I can say from a tech part that I haven't seen or I haven't done, right? Even just being done, I did it in a lab, right? I just never done it or really thought about it like that. So, like I say, PBO got to get a little better also. Well, I'm gonna hang out for a couple more minutes, shoot it out if you have any more questions. Like I said, PBO gonna finish up his dinner and do a little more work, then get a happy hump day going tomorrow. Definitely check me in Discord and Simply Cyber or Study GRC. I'm usually in a number of Discords out there, so usually if you add me, I'll find it. I'll find it in my list of things to check out. So, oh man, excuse me. Once again, I want to thank everybody for joining me. I'm glad y'all came through. Check me out tomorrow at 6. You will see the thumbnail. I'll get that finished tonight. Once I said it's gonna do incident system manager, and inside system managers services incident management is part of that. The part of that is automation and system manager. Once again, we'll talk about you got a DDoS attack, or one thing too is just regular incidents. If your web app's not releasing memory, right, and it's going to take all the memory of the EC2, right, that would be an incident. So part of that was if your IS or Tomcat or Apache memory got above, 700 meg, which is not normal for something that small that we running. Um, Stop all the connections, restart it, and open it up. Right. We used to do that at DoD, but we had to do it manually. Then we start setting up cron jobs to do it down. Right. You can set up an incident manager. That's a common incident is memory leaks in the app. So every night, check the memory, and if it's above a certain amount, just kill that EC2 and it'll restart it up because we got load balancer. We might have a minimum two EC2 spinning up in each one of these availability zones. You see A1, AZ1, and AZ2. So on each web tier and app tier, we could be starting up two EC2s in each. So if one of them had too much memory, we could just kill that EC2 at night when there's no traffic. Then Amazon would automatically start up too, so you wouldn't have to worry about it. I do too. Facts. I see compliance engineer and privacy engineer. I think those skill set works well together. But you're right. I do see that a lot. And I think, like we talked about, cookies, deleting, tagging, um, where your data is at, where you locate it. Then you could use DLPs a little easier too if your data's tagged. So, no, I think that's 100% correct, Dwight. I think I'm out. I want to wish everybody a good night. Come check me out tomorrow at 6. Definitely check out my man Dwight and Chris out. They released their privacy stream tonight. I checked it out. Definitely great information. I wasn't quite familiar with some of the dark stuff, to be honest. A lot of times when you do strictly blue team, um, when you do STIGs and CMCs and 800-53 and IRS Pub 1075, that hardening, if it's done correct, is going to be the 80%, right? So then the 20% is going to be the nuanced stuff, or the 5%, or the 10%, right? That's going to be top of the pyramid, nation states and big hackers. So when you do the STIGs, you take out, the basic guys or the kind of good guys, right? Right. So there, as they say, there's levels to this, right? So a lot of times being a blue team, I just try to focus on that particular hardening. Because every 3 years, right, we get external penetration test, and they're going to actually identify a lot of that top of the pyramids, nuanced stuff, attack, nation state type of attack. So I always tell people we got to block and tackle before we do the triple fleet flicker. So once again, I want to appreciate everybody for joining me. You can definitely check out a replay. You can definitely reach out at ProfessorBlackOps@gmail.com, and I'll be out there looking at stuff. Shout out to Chris. I appreciate it. So you can definitely reach out to me. I try to check my email every 48 hours. I'm an ex-professor, so we get 2 days to check it out. Appreciate your network, bro. We're going to have to do a collabo since you kind of retired. Definitely my Cisco guy, Juniper guy, doing it big. So you guys should jump on his channel and do the STIG of the day. So that helps me and help him, right? Help him trying to get him used to seeing federal checks, federal compliance, and what that looks like. It helps me because he's a high-level security guy. Me doing compliance, I need to be able to communicate with high-level networking guys and give them checks. And if they couldn't do those checks, let's talk about mitigating controls and what that looks like. So I should do that on this channel, hopefully without bothering my young man too much, hitting him with the stick of the day. But once again, I appreciate everybody. I want to thank y'all for joining me. BBO out. I haven't told a lot of people this. My birthday's Friday. I'll be 57. I'm old. So I would appreciate everybody for joining the old guy today. So tick tock. Time moves fast. Once again, I appreciate everybody for joining me. I'm out.